Claire Davis here for Mental Health Chats, and we have Benny back. Hello, Benny. How are you going?
G'day, Claire. How are you going? I'm well.
That's good. Thanks for joining us. We are talking today. We're bringing together some interesting facts and figures about suicide because we've had three great speakers. We've had 𝗁𝗵𝗲𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀, 𝗁𝗵𝗲𝗀𝗀𝗀 and 𝗁𝗵𝗲𝗀𝗀𝗀, all speaking about different aspects of suicide. So Benny's going to start off with, talking a bit about the facts and figures on suicide. So Benny, what were your thoughts?
Well, firstly, Claire, I noticed that that you refer to complete rather than commit suicide, and I think it was Sue used the word complete, and so did Declan. Tony didn't, but can you tell me why you use that complete? Someone completes their life rather than commit suicide.
Well, actually, I'm glad you asked this, Benny, because this is something I've found quite difficult because we've grown up with the word commit. And when I did my mental health first aid instructor training, due to the fact that suicide was a crime in the UK prior to 1961, what we do now in the workplace and professionals do when referring to suicide is to say that people either attempted to take their life or they completed their life instead of commit, because it infers that they have committed a crime.
Yeah, right.
And those people who did not fully complete their life, so they attempted suicide, were actually put into jail. They were treated as criminals, and actually they were really low in their feelings and very, very depressed to get to that state.
It's definitely that reference is definitely carried on. Most people, 99% of people, I think, still use the word commit suicide. So that the criminalisation theme has just continued on. I don't think it's like most people refer to it today.
Yeah.
Then it was decriminalised back in 1961 in England.
Yeah. Do you know anything about the stats on Australia when they changed?
Yeah, it's surprising actually. It goes on a state basis, so it comes under state law. And in Victoria, it wasn't until, well, it was 6 years after England. It was in 1967 in Victoria. It's 22 years later in New South Wales.
Really? Gosh.
29 years later in the ACT, and 35 years later in the NT, 1996.
1996 in Northern Territory.
In the Northern Territory, and 1983 in New South Wales.
Wow.
This is after it was decriminalised in 1961 in England. So it just seems an enormous amount of time before those changes happened in Australia.
That's really interesting, because a lot of the time the laws do follow in Australia from the UK, and I didn't realise it was quite that late. And I actually was teaching legal studies in 1983 in New South Wales, and it never came up in the syllabus. So that's really, really interesting.
Yeah, it was never an offence in Queensland or Western Australia. And the contemporary relationship between suicide and Australian law is that suicide is a tragedy, but not a crime. And that's from the Supreme Court of Victoria.
Right. Interesting. Very, very interesting. Yeah. The other thing that I found interesting from my talks with Declan in particular was that Declan mentioned that most people, not everybody, but a lot of more people than we realise actually have suicidal thoughts.
Right.
And, that goes...
Yeah, he was saying that every situation is different as well.
Yeah. Yeah, he was saying every situation is different.
But that's interesting that he noted that a lot of people have suicidal thoughts. So how does that work? How do thoughts then translate into action? I think we've spoken about it before, the different stages of thought process that people go through.
There are, and I found out when I was training mental health first aid, we had a speaker, and she spoke actually of a relative of hers who had a condition called passive suicide ideation. And passive suicide ideation isn't isn't that you're trying to complete your life, but it's actually that you don't want to live. So you wake up every morning and you just don't want to be here. You don't want to be on this earth. You're so low, you don't want to be here, but you're not putting that into action. Whereas active suicide ideation is where you put it into action and you try to complete your life, or you do complete your life. So what we need to be careful of is those people with passive suicide ideation, they're so low, we don't want it to switch, that they actually become active suicide ideation and try to complete their life. So it's working on their mental health and talking about suicide. That all three people said talking about suicide, using the word suicide so that people aren't actually putting it into action.
Yeah, Sue made mention of that we need to talk about it. We need to actually say the word suicide, because I know here in Australia in the news they always steer away from referring to suicide. They don't want to mention it. They cover a story where someone died, and then at the end of the story they quote the 13 11 14, the phone number for Lifeline, and that's really the indicator at the end of the story that, oh, so that person must have taken their own life. But there's still that hesitation, that resistance to use suicide, because they fear that if they mention suicide, the mere mention of the word will trigger someone to move from that passive state to that active state and take their own life.
And the interesting thing is these people are actually thinking about suicide. It's on their mind. They're so low. So we need to ask some questions like, have you had suicidal thoughts? And use the word suicide instead of brushing it under the carpet and pretending it's never happened. And I've found it really interesting. Whenever I've told anyone I'm doing the series of suicide at the moment, a lot of people have actually shied away from it and said, oh, suicide, we don't want to talk about that, as if it's some big taboo, where actually we both know the figures. In the UK, on average, before COVID-19, it was 15 suicides a day. And you've got the Australian figures, which are...
It's 8 a day. 8 Australians die every day by suicide. That's more than double the road toll. And 6 of those are male and 2 are female on average.
Yeah, and that's another interesting fact. So more than the road toll here as well. And they are higher rates for men than women. So with a little bit more digging, I found out actually that the attempts of women are just as high as men, but women don't use as fatal means, whereas men do use more fatal means, so they're more successful. So that's quite distressing as well, that people are so low that they are trying to complete their lives and not succeeding. So how do we support them? And Declan went through the process that every situation is so different when supporting them.
Yeah, it's one of the other stats that I've got here is over 65,000 Australians make a suicide attempt each year. 65,000. It's just incredible. And the latest stats that we've got are for the calendar year 2018. It was 3,046 Australians took their own life.
Yeah.
So it's a major problem. And Tony Phipps pointed out in his chat with you that in the Marines, he was in the Marines, and he said that someone can be so low that they're so low, they've made up their minds that they're going to do it, and it makes it very difficult to pick these people because they just start sort of appearing normal. They've made that decision. Did you want to just talk about that, Claire?
Yeah, so what he said was they've actually made their decision to take their own life, so their mood actually improves because they see that there is an end in sight, which is really difficult for those people who then have to deal with the aftermath. And how do we deal with it? Because it's, I never saw it, I feel so guilty, why didn't I see the signs, etc., etc., why didn't I help them? But so often we can't help them.
Yeah, and you just mentioned that the aftermath of after someone takes their life. One of the other stats that I found when I was researching was that for each life lost to suicide, the impacts are felt by up to 135 people, including family members, work colleagues, friends, first responders at the time of death. So it really impacts a lot of people. And of course, behind all these statistics are the people that, obviously the person that's affected, that's taken their life, and then it has an enormous effect on their family members and friends. And I've certainly had a friend take his life, John Burke from Alice. And Berkey was up here. He drove over from Western Australia a few weeks before he ended up taking his own life. And it makes you think, well, what could we have done? What are the main things that we can do, Claire, to help support people? We know that there are no quick fixes. But it's all about trying to make sure that they don't take that final step.
It is definitely, and it's a situation where all three guests that we had mentioned bringing up the conversation and not shying away from the word suicide. And when we know people are low, actually asking that question. And try, as you and I have said on multiple occasions, if we can intervene early, the recovery is so much quicker than someone's low, and we don't want to get to this stage of suicide. So I'm going to mention our next series. Our next series is about men and mental health, because one of the statistics here in the UK, and I don't know where the statistic is from, but I heard it at a talk on mental health, and it's one farmer a week completes their life here in the UK. So what I've decided to do for the next series is talk about men and mental health. As we know, the attempts for males and females are about the same statistic, but men take more of a fatal means. So if we can get men talking more and men opening up with their emotions more, we will be helping them. So our first speaker is going to be a man called 𝗵𝗆𝗆𝗀𝗃, and he runs a group here in the UK called Dudes and Dogs. And it's all about getting men out there talking, walking with their dogs and talking, and he's such an inspirational speaker.
I'm looking forward to that one. I love our dogs, and I get great relief from being with our dogs, patting our dogs. It's just like I can feel the tension going out of me. And I'm looking forward to covering the farmer one, because in Australia, the people in rural populations are twice more likely to die by suicide. So that's interesting, isn't it? It
is. Definitely.
So I look forward to that one.
So thank you very much, Benny, for your time and your input today. Very, very hard topic to talk about, especially, it's affected so many people's lives over the years. So thank you for your input, and I look forward to interviewing 𝗵𝗆𝗆𝗀𝗃 next time. So thank you very much.
Look forward to it, Claire. Righto.
Bye.